anti-American letter from Osama bin Laden went viral this week. It is time now for our Sunday Group. Josh Kraushaar, editor-in-chief of Jewish Insider, Fox News senior political analyst Juan Williams, Karl Rove, former Bush White House advisor and former Washington State Senate candidate, and Rescuing the American Dream chair, Tiffany Smiley. Welcome to all of you. Okay, so let's start here. I want to play something from Brett Eagleson. His father died on 9/11 trying to save fellow Americans.
You should all know that Hamas and Al-Qaeda and people that you're supporting and giving credibility to would not hesitate 1 second to kill you or kidnap you and your family and hold you ransom simply based on the color of your skin or your gender identity or your nationality or your religion.
I mean, Carl, my issue is not really with TikTok. It's the fact that these young people were so easily swayed by this letter full of calls for theocracy and misogyny and homophobia and all of those other things.
Well, there are a lot of ignorant young people, I guess. But look, there's a broader issue here. We ought to ban TikTok in the United States. This is a China-based company. The Chinese Communist Party is gathering all this data that it collects from TikTok users. And we ought to not allow it to be collecting data on American young people and American users. On the other hand, let's recognize if we do that, this is still going to be a public diplomacy tool of the Chinese Communist Party that they will use to stir up opinion around the world against the United States and our values and the values of the West. So we can ban it here, and I'm all for it, but we got a bigger problem, and then China is our resolute adversary, and they will use this tool against us all around the world.
Yeah, in writing about this, Wall Street Journal editorial board said TikTok is a particular case given its Chinese ownership and the way it now speaks to America's youth. Would the U.S. have let the Soviet Union buy MTV in the 1980s? Juan, I remember the 80s well, and the influence that MTV had in our lives at that point.
No question.
They've got a point.
No, I mean, I actually agree with Carl on this. I just think the Chinese influence is corrosive in terms of young people. You know, I'll tell you what shocks me as a news person is that it's like a third of young people in this country have TikTok as their primary news source. And it's, you know,
not
it's
just
about,
for entertainment,
but
for information.
And you've got to realize that this thing is engineered with its algorithms to be addictive. It's a little bit like tobacco. I think of it in those terms. So when I come to the point Carl was raising, we regulate tobacco in terms of advertising. You know, we impose some limit, age limits, for example, on tobacco. We need to do something similar with this, what I think of as an addictive mental news source controlled by someone who's not our friend, the Chinese. You know, you look at what happened this week with Elon Musk on Twitter. Now, would it be better if it wasn't owned by the Chinese? I don't know. Social media has some real negatives to it. Elon Musk this week affirming, you know, the Jews would not replace this type of thinking in this country. So what happens? Disney, CBS, other companies hold him accountable. Wouldn't it be great if we could hold TikTok and the Chinese accountable for spreading lies about bin Laden and us?
Well, we've had many conversations on the show and all over Capitol Hill about banning it, forcing a change in ownership. And Senator Warner was sitting here last week. I mean, the chair of the Senate Intelligence Committee, like, it's just not happening yet. So those conversations continue. In the meantime, there are conservative groups out there who say we shouldn't be surprised that this happened on TikTok or anywhere else. It says their anti-American sentiment, young people, is the natural consequence of academics indoctrinating students for years with anti-colonial themes that vilify Western progress. Tiffany, they say regardless of what the outlet is, these young people are very open to those arguments that are anti, not pro-American.
Yeah, I think George Orwell said it best. He who controls the past controls the future. And we have, you know, TikTok and other social media platforms across the country are influencing our youth. We know that. I'm a mom of 3 young boys. I'm not afraid to talk about TikTok when my boys get in the car and have the tough conversations. I mean, like Carl said, they're owned by a Chinese, you know, group. Not only that, in 2022, our FBI said that the platform poses national security risks. So as a society, we have to take that seriously, and we have to continue to work to decrease China's influence on our youth. We need to make sure that we're teaching history in our schools. That is a big problem. And for young children and teens, parents have got to be engaged and involved and understand what their children are consuming on a daily basis. You know, in our family, I'm old school, but I put the hard copy Wall Street Journal on our bar every morning for my boys to pick up and read. as parents, the buck stops with us in this country.
I love a hard copy anything. Yeah. That's the old lady in me. I do love it. One of the nuggets I saw, too, in our Fox polling from this week about young people and where we are, under 30 is the only group in the polling that supports Palestinians over Israel, Josh.
Yeah, I mean, this is all connected to social media and where people get their news. I think Tiffany's advice about everyone reading a newspaper every day instead of getting their media from TikTok or any social media platform would be make a big difference. There's a big political challenge, though, too, especially when it comes to the White House. It's hard to put this toothpaste back in the tube. And people, the number of people using TikTok is only growing, not shrinking. And young people are using it increasingly, and they're not heeding the warnings from government and from political leaders. And the Biden campaign is facing a tough decision as well. They do not use TikTok on their campaign. But there's a lot of pressure coming from, they want to get young voters. These young voters are not they're not reading the newspaper. They're not listening to the press releases. So there's pressure from the left among the voters that are not supporting Biden to actually get on TikTok and really, that could really maximize the threats we face. So it's a real challenge politically.
Something else, we had a lot of interesting numbers in our polling this week, too, on the border. And one of them, when it comes to the president's job approval on immigration, as we've talked about this now as potentially as a national security threat, 33% of America agrees that the president's doing a good job on immigration. 64% disapprove. Juan, there's real trouble there. And it's not just this issue. We'll talk next break about all of the other issues where he's not doing well. But this is one that's getting front and center attention.
Yeah, I think especially on the right. I mean, it's not as big an issue for people on the left, but a huge issue for people on the right. And, people regularly mention to me we have a high number of people now a record number of people being stopped on the border. My thought is, these encounters indicate that we do have enforcement. The Biden administration does have a story to tell in terms of stopping people.
Wait. Let's talk about the story to tell, because we also have migrant encounters in border. Last month, highest ever for October, more than 240,000 people. That's in 1 month, Juan.
Right. So that's what I'm saying is
that's the story.
Those encounters mean that those people are being stopped. If we weren't encountered them, we wouldn't be stopping them.
But we know that
they're being counted. They're being counted. They're not being stopped. They're being released into our country.
No, that's a different issue. That's our
we're doing a darn good job of counting them, but we're doing a lousy job of keeping them from coming in and returning them.
Where they're coming from, too.
Exactly. In fact, this is just ridiculous that we ought to give credit to them to count them, because what we ought to give them credit for, and they deserve a little bit of credit, is returning them. They tried an experiment last month. Venezuelans. They tried in September and October to return Venezuelans back. And guess what happened? They compared 2 weeks in October and 2 weeks to September. When they started returning Venezuelans immediately out of the country, the number of Venezuelans attempting to cross the border dropped 65%. Maybe we ought to get more aggressive about returning these people and not just be content with counting.
I think that we need, as America, as a nation, but especially as a Congress, to deal with immigration policy.
We have the tools already to do it.
What's happening is these guys are fighting each other in the House.
Well, okay, but it is fair to say.
In the Senate.
Fair to
They're
say.
not doing anything for
Congress
dysfunction.
Congress has a rule that has something to do with asylum, but the rules that are administratively applied are rules that could allow them to do with other people what they're doing with the Venezuelans.
Senate Majority Leader McConnell wants to deal with this issue. It's the House Republicans in their dysfunction.
Okay, let's just say this. Well, right, even President Biden has now been like, okay, we're going to start building the wall again. I mean, there are clearly issues that feel intractable, but there have been Democrats in charge of White House, House, and Senate, Republicans in charge of White House, House, and Senate, and this still hasn't gotten solved. So maybe during the commercial break, our panel will figure out all of the solutions to this. But up next, they're going to tackle the drama for the 2024 run for the White House, including more Fox News polls, rough numbers for one president, a boost for another one. Fox News correspondent Mark Meredith is live on the ground in Iowa, where candidates are fighting for every vote with the caucuses just weeks away.
My name is Dale, and this is Purple. Purple will be trained as a service dog.